certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting online to ensure public access to the discussions of the Boston Human Rights Commission. The public may access this call through telephone, video conferencing. Members of the public will have an opportunity to provide comments at the end of this meeting. Everyone knows this meeting is recorded. So first order of business is approval of the minutes of November 18th. Do I have a motion? Are there any additions, omissions, corrections? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is approved. Okay. So we have sort of a vague agenda here, which we've changed some, but between Evandro and I, we're going to go over sort of where we are and maybe short term over the next couple of months where we hope to be, and to get your advice. And Evandro, why don't you start? And maybe you would start with the legislative piece in terms of both the hearings that have been going on about credit and the other piece of legislation that's.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll skip a little bit to this point. Actually, I think, first of all, I want to welcome all the commissioners, and I want to welcome members of the public that are present. For those, particularly the public members that are here, I'm Evandro Carvalho. I am the executive director of the commission. To kind of dive into the issue, particularly relating to legislative agenda that may be pertaining to our commission, I'll start first and foremost with one that it's an issue related to what one of the issues that we sort of targeted, right? Which is from the beginning, as we know, the mayor wanted to focus on immigrant rights and protection of immigrants in the city of Boston. And that sort of, it's an ongoing issue. And in fact, a lot of advocates in this space are concerned that we may let off the steam a little bit now that we have a new potential administration. So people are excited about that, but they're also concerned. In that sort of space, as you know, we've had conversations with Yusuf Valley, for instance, from the mayor's office of immigrant advancement. We had some leaders of the immigrant, nonprofit world that came and talked to us about potential issues. And so we sort of, over the months, sort of been debating on where we can land on this, right? And that leads me to sort of to talk about this thing that happened not too long ago, which was last week, I think literally, I joined the city council at a hearing on this. Essentially, the hearing was about sanctuary safe spaces in the city of Boston. And it was about, what are we doing? What is BPD doing? What is allowed? What is the Trust Act? And what is the gap that potentially exists within the Trust Act, okay? And then this is obviously, as you've probably seen, and I know we had some discussions about this, most recently we saw ICE potentially stopping someone at West Roxbury. So these sort of stories, they continue to happen over this past year. So this hearing was attended by Yusuf Valley, again, from Immigrant Advancement, some BPS folks to talk about what BPS is doing in this space. And essentially, and actually, there were some advocates that attended the hearing, including your Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, if I'm saying it correctly,
Yeah.
and a few other lawyers in the space, and so on. So essentially, the discussion was about the Trust Act and the fact that we've had a couple iterations of this Trust Act, right? It was created, I believe, in 2014, and then it was amended, I believe, last year. And they're now talking about potentially another one, right? That, they're not happy with where we are as a city and think that there may be a Trust Act 3.0, as they called it in the hearing, a potential for that. So it kind of alerted me to this. The reason I'm bringing it up is because there may be an opportunity for the commission to work on this Trust Act 3.0, which I guess I didn't say this, but this will be next year, as in 2021, as council is finishing up their year-end sort of work, right? They start again in January, we're filing new legislations and so on. So there going to be some action on this. And what I mentioned to you all before on this that I think we can do is sort of position ourselves where we as the commission can potentially enforce the Trust Act by not only looking at what's required of reporting, particularly from BPD and other places, but also to potentially be a source of a place where people can go and complain. I think, at least from my perspective, one of the things that I've seen as a gap here is that we're sort of relying in the agencies to sort of produce, right? To say this, to enforce themselves, if you will, to some extent, right? I think there's no mechanism for people to say, go right now and say, for instance, my family, this happened to my family in Dorchester, and involved ICE and involved other potential agencies. So I think there's an opportunity here for us to be the focal point and potentially help enforce this Trust Act. And again, I mentioned this before, they are doing this in this is not setting precedent in what's the place? I'm sorry, in California, in San Francisco. Okay, they're doing that in San Francisco. So that's one of the things that I think we can plug in to help immigrant communities. Now, the other component, that's one topic in legislation, okay, in ordinance, if you will, in the city of Boston. The other one that came up, again, is something that is even more closer to us, which is related to credit bans in the city of Boston, credit check bans, okay? And I mentioned this a few meetings ago. Essentially, the city council put in a proposal to essentially change the ordinance of the commission, the Boston Human Rights Commission ordinance, to insert a section in there to say that credit checks in the city of Boston cannot be used by employers to determine any employment opportunities, whether to hire, whether to advance someone, and so on, right? And the reason this is back is because, one, as I mentioned, I actually attended a hearing on this back in October 20th, a month or so, 2 months or so ago. Now, last week, I was called upon to go into a working session, which is another procedure of the city council, working session on this issue, right? And essentially, to fast forward, actually, I just saw this on Twitter. It looks like the city council voted to pass this ordinance. I just saw Lydia Edwards is one of the people involved in this, essentially, saying kudos to us for passing this and other legislation. So this is sort of in front of us now. And the next step, I think, is that the mayor has the chance to either he can just say no, he can veto and sort of, I guess, counter offer some changes to it, if you will, right? So there's an opportunity still there, I think, for us to be in this space. Margaret and I had several conversations in this space because when I went before the commission, before the city council, I had to sort of try to portray that the commission could and should, and we are ready to do something on this if it's passed, but also that's sort of up to the mayor, if you will, right? To decide whether he's going to sign this piece of a law or not, right? So I think that's a fair assessment of the issue. One of the pushbacks I can tell you from the legal perspective, as in the law department of the city of Boston, was that potentially this can get in a space that violates conflicting with state laws, other state laws, particularly in relation to a home rule petition, and as well as interference with employer-employee relationship. And again, this is the lawyers inside City Hall saying some of these things, right? I was hoping to sort of have a chance to discuss with you before obviously, or the date that they're voting on, and they just voted on. So, but I think that's an opportunity for us to, as we're going to discuss later on, actually on the ordinance, which is why it's on here, to sort of think about the ordinance and what does it say, and what is it that, obviously there's other people, including the city council, which they have responsibility to do so, to try to change it. But we also can make recommendations and make changes, make recommendations to the mayor and the city council for making changes, right, into our ordinance, which is again how the Trust Act thing becomes also relevant, because that's another issue that we could potentially focus on. So that's I'm happy to sort of pause here and take any questions, because I do understand that this is sort of a big update, if you will. And again, I apologize. I didn't think that it was going to move so fast in terms of what is happening here. But the credit check ban is because obviously we come in, what, today is December 16th, and by the end of the year, I believe the city council, if this didn't pass, the city council has to come and pass and put the ordinance again and sort of go through the process where they're trying to push it now and have the mayor either sign or don't sign, or sort of debate that this political, not political, but this issue.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And
So Evandro, what would our role actually be?
Thank you for that question. Great question. I have it here. I should have mentioned it. Essentially, our role will be to sort of it'll be our authority to investigate those claims. So if someone in their position, if they're trying to get a job somewhere and something happens and they believe they were discriminated against and it had to do with their credit history, they can file a complaint, and it's our job again to, at that point, to engage our process, which again the ordinance itself sort of says what the process within our body is, but they also included a fine, I believe, of $100. I don't know exactly what the language finally they voted on today, but the discussions I was a part of, they wanted to include a fine of $100. This is obviously a big issue. It's an important issue. It's just, I think there was some debates of whether they're going to push it, how much they're going to push it, but it seems like they're there now. So it's more in our court, and to some extent more so in the mayor's court as well. So I think we should think about what our opinions are. Go ahead, Mark.
it's not in our court yet.
Good
So
point.
the city council has passed it.
Right.
And it's now on the mayor's desk, or city council has to pass it again? Or is it on the
No,
mayor's desk?
it's not now in a sense in the mayor's desk because it just happened. But yes, the next step is to go to the mayor.
And if the mayor vetoes it, can the city council override the veto?
I'll have to get back to you on that, to be honest. What the process there is, I didn't think that they could veto it.
Override the veto.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, thank you. I see Ben Goldberg over there looking like he may say something. So if feel free to chime in.
Is it online, or if you have a copy of whatever they voted on, I'd like to.
I literally, as I was prepping for, not prepping, like 15 minutes ago, I saw that.
You could send out to everybody what.
Sorry, it's breaking news, so it's not.
It was just today.
I got
it.
Yeah.
But what the follow-up will be from this, thank you, Margaret, is we'll send you the language. I will find the final language. We'll send you the next steps, right? Where this goes and when that happens, right? But so I apologize for some of the nuances of the processes with the city council and the mayor. I'm not completely, I'm not there yet. I don't have.
So why don't you send us a copy of the ordinance, and let us know what the mayor does. And then if you would let us know, I know that he can negotiate with the city council.
Right, you can.
Change, but suppose, the question I have is, can the city council override the mayor? I think the answer is no.
I think the answer is no.
I'm not sure. Obviously, the state legislature can override the governor.
Right.
I think the answer is no, the city council can't, but can you find that out?
I absolutely will.
Okay. And are there other questions about we don't have any answers on this credit act because we haven't seen it yet. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. It does say the enforcement is the Human Rights Commission. I do know that. If the enforcement is $100, it's not a very big sanction, I must say.
There were some legal reasons for that, actually, to be honest, and it wasn't clear to me what that was. And I can tell you, we looked at it briefly, and in New York they did it, and it was, I think it was $125,000 or something for every violation. So, and that's New York, big city, New York. So, but there might be a reasoning behind the
okay.
fines.
So let's put a pin in that and go back to the Trust Act.
Okay.
Because I think that one of the things that if we did in a pre-meeting is talk about this in terms of looking at sometime next year about the treatment of immigrants and gathering some information on the treatment of immigrants in Boston, and whether or not we could have a hearing on this. We question whether immigrants will come forward.
Right.
But at least maybe advocates will, to tell us some stories about immigrant treatment and issues so we can get a handle on this. Because the hearing that the city council had was with agencies, government agencies talking, not advocates.
No, it was actually, correction, Margaret.
Oh, yeah, they have some.
They had some advocates.
They
It
did,
was
the ACLU.
Forest Committee. Yeah,
Right.
ACLU actually was there as well. So
And the
it was-
lawyers committee.
correct.
Right, right. So I think what we would want to do is concentrate on what are the issues that immigrants are facing, and is there any sort of path for us?
Mhm.
Because there is no path for them, there's nowhere they can go to complain.
Right,
But they
right.
could come to us because it is discrimination. It is, there's no question, it's discrimination. If you're picked up, swept up by ICE, I'm not going to be swept up by ICE.
Right.
Some of you would be swept up by ICE. And based on what you look like, right?
Right. Right.
And that's the problem. That's the basis of discrimination. You're discriminated against because you appear to look like someone they would be interested in, because you might be an immigrant.
Right.
So that's
the-
really discrimination.
The caveat there, though.
We said we'd talk to Youssefi and,
Yes.
and also keep involved and updated on the Trust Act, because that's something we would be very interested in. So we need to keep involved in what's going on there.
Mhm.
Just for the record,
Questions about the Trust Act, because I think that's something that's very important.
I go ahead, Judge. I saw you wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say, the city council can override the mayor by 2/3 vote.
You can.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
wow. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All you have to do is have a good internet, huh?
That's all you need now. Wish I had it in.
Yeah, I think
We
one of the
thought it
things that
because you were a judge, but it wasn't. You just looked it up. We know.
I looked it up, yes.
Thank
but
you.
but the Trust Act, what makes the Trust Act relevant to us particularly is because we are a Boston Human Rights Commission, as I think, Margaret, you've said it in the past. But and so what ICE itself does, which is a federal agency, is it may be beyond a capacity or beyond a purview, but the Trust Act regulates more so than anything is the spaces in which city agencies may may interact with those federal agents or not, right? So
Yes.
which is, I think, that's the hook for us, if you will, right?
Specifically the Boston Police Department.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Trust Act, I should say, the Trust Act is obviously BPD is at the center of this for obvious reasons, but it does sort of, it says, for instance, like anyone that sort of works in the city's, that's the city department or city space, you can't do it, right? So if someone I think they can even ask if someone, what their immigration status is, if you will, right? So as a department of the city, you can't do it, right? So that, for instance, if someone comes into, say, D&D, for lack of a better example, trying to get some housing help, and they started questioning them about, their immigrant status and so on, and they don't get the benefits that they thought they should have, they couldn't come and complain to us, right? So it's BPD, but it's also broader than BPD. Does that make sense? What else? Is anything else on this? Hopefully, I know it's kind of all of a sudden and it's a lot, but I want these two things sort of jumped.
I think that's fine. I think we need to move on, and I just think we need to
Sure.
keep up to date on those two things.
Okay. I have a few other things on my list, but I do see that the timing has moved for us. I was gonna sort of say where we are with the digital divide, as well as what we are with the events issue of black males.
Why don't you talk about the digital divide and the plan?
Okay, so the digital divide, we've been discussing this for several meetings. We've talked to DoIT in the city of Boston, that is the IT department. We talked to some folks in the nonprofit world. Okay, thank you. In the nonprofit world, and we learned a few things, at least, that I want to put up front. One is that the most vulnerable population in this space include older adults, students, particularly in BPS, immigrants, and those in public housing. Okay, one of the other things we learned is that 48,000 households in the city of Boston do not have a desktop or a laptop, and 38,000 households do not have internet connectivity. One question that we haven't answered, I think, and I've had some conversations about this with some of you, is that we haven't gotten to the percentage, for instance, the breakdown of the disparity on the basis of race or ethnicity, for instance, right? Like how do we understand this issue that impacts people based on their race or ethnicity in the city of Boston? That's at least one thing that I think we can hopefully answer as we plan going forward. But I think that going into next year, some of the things that we can do is first and foremost have another meeting potentially to bring BPS in. We haven't talked about in depth about what's going on with the students. BAJ, again, public housing is another space that we should meet with folks in that space, and as well as someone that can tell us more about immigrant populations and how they're affected. This is the way I'm doing this, is looking at the focus and the focus of the vulnerable people and see how do we sort of touch those and the spaces of those vulnerable populations, okay? And finally, we want to also have a hearing where we talked about this in the past, but potentially have a testimonial sort of public hearing where we can have folks that have had firsthand knowledge and experience with this issue, and in the end, wrap the topic up with conversations with the folks with the business world, that is Verizon, Comcast, RCN, and others, to sort of then lend hopefully on some real solutions and recommendations that we can report on, and hopefully by the end of the second quarter, I'm thinking as we think about the budget season, particularly as we go into FY 2022, that is by June, July, that we should have something in paper that can say this is what we think we should do to fix this issue, because money decisions will be made, and I think money is obviously a big issue here. I'll go into the next one briefly.
No, let's
Real quick.
let's hold it
Go
there
ahead.
for a minute.
Hold it. Go ahead.
No, real quick, Evaldo,
Sure.
is that this is a true tragedy, because we were doing this 20 years ago, and the data has been collected and it's there. The real tragedy is hearing you say almost the same numbers that we were talking about 20 years ago, in the same conversation of hitting with the different internet providers and stuff like that, and also how we tracked the communities of color, and
Right.
It was the same, identical. And I think we have an opportunity to really underscore that, one, it's not new. Two, no, it hasn't moved, even though the advocates back in the day have moved on this. I think one of the biggest things that happened in the past 20 years that sustained itself was the continuation of Computer Go Home projects, where we had the guests come on at our last meeting. However, East West Foundation was the foundation that provided computers, did all the data collection. I happened to chair that during that time. So I think we have an opportunity to really, really underscore, first and foremost, this is not new, and you haven't done a damn thing. Excuse me, y'all haven't done a damn thing in 20 years, and the issue is still the same, and it's being even highlighted more with COVID and the way kids are at school today. I think we really have an opportunity to make some noise, and people can't say, oh, it's new. No, we had the same conversation 20 years ago with Comcast, with Infinity, all those guys, with the mayor's support at the time, and still nothing has been done. So I think to your point, I think we have a tremendous opportunity to really make these folks accountable, because there's no excuse for it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Other comments? What I will say is, if you remember way back when we sent you a map, and there is quite some information that shows you that Black and brown people, that is where the lack of decent quality broadband is. And we can use more data to show that, no question about it, but clearly that's where we're having problems. And it is two problems. One is broadband and two is equipment, is computers. We've handed out Chromebooks for students in BPS, but you know, there are needs of adults as well, and they're not getting Chromebooks from anybody or computers from anybody. And at times, you know, other cities have collected computers from people and refurbished them and handed them out and actually asked people to contribute them or contribute money for them. That hasn't happened here with anybody in this
No,
era.
I agree 100%, Margaret. And I remember the map that you're talking about. What I was sort of alluding to, the gap there is obviously when you look at the map, right? The neighborhoods particularly that are impacted, you can
Yeah.
tell, right? You know, we know where people live in the city of Boston, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think what I haven't seen, at least maybe I'm mistaken in the space, is I haven't seen a percentage that says, you know, this 85% of people of color in the city of Boston is impacted by this, right? That's sort of percentage to sort of the narrative of it, to sort of bring it out. And I think that's a way to sort of tie it, particularly, I mean, it's obviously discrimination, right?
Right.
Right. But I think beyond the obvious, as we create the narrative, I think a particular one or two data sets that specify the racial breakdown or some sort of breakdown of that effect of people of color, it would be more helpful to us.
No, I think that's right. All we have is the map and it shows
Right.
areas.
Where
Right.
we would get the data sets.
It's very difficult to get, Riz. That's why it shows, you know, where the fiber optic lines go up to Mattapan and then go around Mattapan. It would be very interesting to ask Comcast why. Why
Right.
did you fiber optic stop at the Mattapan border and then go around it? Literally go around it. And the answer is because we didn't think it would be economically profitable for us to go into Mattapan and into those multifamily, 3-family houses. I assume that's what the answer is, but I don't know. I'd be glad to have them answer that question. Why did you stop at the edge of Mattapan? Why didn't you go in there into Mattapan and Roxbury and you did it everywhere else? So, you know, yes, we could use more data, but some of the questions are so obvious. It's just
Right.
redlining mortgages,
Yep.
right? I mean, you
Yep.
see the people redlined and that's what we've got in this. But, you know, more data is better, but at some point, you know, some things become obvious. And, you know, as we know today, kids are trying to learn on their cell phones. They're trying to do their homework on their cell phones. And it's a shame. And as we heard from JVS, you know, they've at least solved one problem. They have a lending library for computers. I mean, one of the things they've done. So it's
Right.
interesting. So we have sort of a plan here in terms of moving ahead, hearing more information, and then asking, you know, having the companies come in. And then we got to find a solution to this. I mean, when Mike Lynch came in from the city, as I've said before, he said, you know, we've been working on this probably for 20 years. But I got no sense of urgency. You know, we've been working on this. So when is it going to be fixed? When is it going to be fixed? Is in the budget to be fixed when, and what will it cost? Right?
Mhm.
I want to know the answer to that. What is it going to cost to 100% of the people in Boston have access to broadband, quality broadband? What does it cost? That's the question I want answered. And then what do we need to do to make sure that people have the right hardware to be able to use the quality broadband? And that's why I want to get to that point for us to be able to answer that question. All right, so we're going to set up those meetings over the next couple of months and see where we are and get to a point where we can answer that question and where we can ask the city, are you going to provide this money to do this? And what's the plan? Because I don't think they have a plan, right? I mean, I didn't hear one. Did anybody hear one? I didn't hear one.
No, but I was surprised that the city has already implemented a plan on energy. The electric bills for everybody are going into one provider selected by the city of Boston, unless you choose to opt
Right.
out.
Right.
So that's a model.
Yep, that is a model, absolutely. And they could do the same thing here. They could, decide to negotiate with a provider and provide lower cost. A part of that deal would be to providing everyone quality internet and with a sort of sliding scale somehow. They could do that. They have the opportunity to negotiate a deal here.
Well, I think if you look in the contracts that the city has with all the different providers, it says that, but it says it in theory with no accountability.
That's
And
right.
I think what really it comes down to as us as a body of how can we make that accountability become alive?
Yeah.
Because it involves money and because it involves a commitment from folks who are making money.
Yeah.
How do we now leverage our commission
Yeah.
to say to the mayor, to say to these providers, hey, listen, this is what it is. This is what we need, and we need to make it happen now. I mean, because the conversation has been going on, and Waldo, I will reach out to some of my old colleagues who happen to still be around over at Harvard, who was doing some of this work 20 years ago, and I know they might have some stuff that might be valuable to have this conversation with some of the research that they did back then. But
That'd be great.
it really comes down to, we know, they know, everyone knows the problem, they know the issue. We're bringing it back up. We're going to put some muscle behind it and some accountability, because like I said, it's like it's on steroids now because of COVID-19. And they can't just put it under the rug. They can't.
Well, then we should really take that burden on and make sure they don't. And this should be on our agenda every meeting, is what's the progress on it and what have we done? I'm personally going to go back to Mike Lynch and ask him, what is the plan? You came to us and you talked about this, and Mike, what is the plan? Is there a plan, and what's the timeline, and what does it cost? I'll take that on myself. I'll go back to him and ask. So I will do that and report what I find out at the next meeting. Let me go on to the next thing, which is the police report. We've talked about this, and you got, though I know it was late today, you got out of their appendix, Susan put together a list of the recommendations and timeline out of the police task force report. And what we had said is we would sort of try to serve as an oversight, that Wayne Bellott and his committee have been dissolved, and the staff person for the committee has taken another job. He has left the city. Jerome has taken another job. So neither the staff person nor the committee is here. They're gone. So Susan put together, all the things that and the mayor accepted the report and the timeline. He said, I'm going to do all these things. The report was accepted in November, the 10th of November. So the 10th of February, some of these things are supposed to be done. Well, some of these things were supposed to be done in 30 days. But since we only got it today, I would suggest we look at it, and we ask Susan Evandro to look at some of the things. I ask everybody to look at some of these things. But I think sometime, in February at least, that's 90 days, which is a lot of these things were 30 days. Some of them were 60 days, that's 2 months. And some of them were 90 days, that's 3 months. And then there's longer term ones that are 6 months. But I love the one that says already in place, discipline consequences for a violation of body cameras. I don't know, is that in place? It says it's already in place. If you don't wear your body camera, you get disciplined. Can we do that? Can we discipline them if they don't wear their body cameras?
I would think so. I mean, I remember when this was going on, there was a heavy sort of discussions with the police unions, right? This was
Oh, I
a,
remember.
yeah,
But
this was a
it's over.
contract
The
issue, so
discussion's
this,
over. The discussion is over. There was
What
a
is the
pilot.
discipline though?
Yeah, the pilot was over. The union never accepted it. The union said it's going to be negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement. And the mayor said, no, it's not a collective bargaining agreement negotiation. It's not subject to collective bargaining. So everybody's supposed to wear one. Period.
What is the discipline if they don't?
I don't have no idea. I
That's
have
the
no
real
idea.
question.
I have no idea. The point of this, all of this is, what I said at our last meeting is these things get done and they get put on a shelf. And a lot of work got done. And then also the legislation, the governor vetoed the legislation and sent it back, as he vetoed the Roe legislation. Roe versus Wade legislation, sent that back. Not that I'm paying any attention to what he's sending back, but he sent both of them back. And so we
there
really
are,
need to pay attention to this. And I would suggest that all of us take a look at this, and that at some point we should issue a report. I'm not thinking we should do it after 30 days, November 10th, December 10th, because December 10th is gone, or even January. But I think we should think about, after 3 months, which is beyond the 60 days, we ought to do some report for the public of the status of these recommendations. Somebody should take this on, and I think it should be us, because there isn't anybody else who's going to do that. And what I said at our last meeting, I think we should be in the place of the public and represent the public in terms of accountability for this. And actually, that's what Wayne said. Wayne Budd, when we talked to him, he said somebody should represent the public and hold the mayor's feet to the fire, hold the citizens, the BPD, and make sure that they either reject or do what is here, but at least they respond. They're supposed to be, a lot of these things they're supposed to be doing now.
in that regard, I can interject briefly.
Ann, why don't we
here.
let Ann talk first?
Go ahead.
Ann,
Go ahead.
So one of the main things they were supposed to be doing was to establish this police accountability civilian task force. Did that get established?
That,
The
I'm glad
review
you asked.
board, you mean? Yeah,
That,
the citizen
It-
review board.
Who established it if this commission is gone? Who
He's
is
not
it?
a commissioner, he's a
mayor
staff
that-
person, right? He was a staff person in the mayor's office. They have put out a position description for an executive director. I know they've done that. Ben?
So also in late breaking news, I think the
Yes,
council
thank you.
voted to
Thank you.
establish it today, but maybe not exactly as it was recommended. Apparently it has some differences. And that's just off of the Globe website.
Yeah, so, thank you. I'll add to that.
That's
Let finish, let Ben finish.
Go ahead.
But I think, Hannah's question is really kind of the fundamental question, which is, of all of these recommendations, who is supposed to do what? And I think that once we get a list of all of those who's, I imagine like most of these, it's the police commissioner, but some of it's going to be the city council. We should give them a heads up. I think we are planning on doing a report. We are going to send you a letter, most likely in February, seeking, we want you to tell us about the status. maybe that sort of helps move it along when they see that that is coming. But we don't want to,
Surprise.
sneak up on them and give them the report. We want to tell them this is going to be followed, because I think, what we really want them to do is do the things.
Right.
We don't want to write a report saying you didn't do the things.
Yeah, this is not a gut you. This is a encourage you to
Exactly.
do what's right. Totally
So I
agree.
think-
Great idea, Ben. Absolutely. The right
So-
way. We want to encourage you and support you.
Right. So is that something that
Whoever that is.
Evandro- Yes. Well,
Sorry,
I mean that's the
Whoever
first
that
question.
is, right?
Gotta figure out the who's, and then either Evandro or the chair or one
Right.
of us need to get on the horn with those people and say this is the plan that we're moving towards.
So I think that if you read the report carefully, you can discern who's
Yes.
responsible for what.
Right.
So we need to do that. And then I think, Ben, you get a great suggestion. We should write a letter to whoever is responsible saying that we are going to, write a report whenever it is, and a report to the public on the status of the recommendations that you're responsible for. And these are the ones we believe that you're responsible for, and we would like to know if we're correct, and what the status of the recommendation is. I think that's the way we should do it. So we need to be sure we know who's responsible for what. And what happened today, Ben? They set up a citizen review board?
So they vote.
It-
Go ahead, Ben.
Evandro probably knows better. All I did was I read a Globe article, so I'll let Evandro deal with
So
that.
I guess to go along with, this is how I see it, okay? Obviously, the mayor created this task force and appointed the bulk of the people and did a press conference and accepted it all. And I remember the chief of police, not commissioner of police was there. The members of the board, the task force were there, right? So I think heavily, this is on the mayor and the police. A lot of it, the changes are with the police, right?
We
One
know
of-
all of that. What happened
One of the
today?
things that the mayor did, this was in November 12th, he announced in one of the press conferences that he was filing an ordinance with the city council to create the Office of Police Accountability Transparency, okay?
Right.
And then the other portion was what Ben just mentioned, which was to create this first ever civilian review board, right? And to create a stronger internal affairs oversight panel, right? Because there was these three bodies that were going to be responsible for, if you will, overseeing the work of the police, the accountability and the transparency. So what they voted on today was this. So essentially the city council, and I don't know again what the final version is, but the city council voted to create this OPET office, and they voted to create the civilian review board, right? Which is to some extent within the timeline that the task force sort of said that they should happen, right? And I guess my 2 cents beyond that on this is, if we're going to play a role, particularly if we're going to execute a report at some point, right? I think obviously one of the things we should be doing, I actually, as the ED, have been doing, is sort of looking at putting a timeline of what is happening, what hasn't happened, right? Look at the 30, 60 days, but everything was supposed to happen in 180 days, in 6 months, which, to be honest, I've read the report several times. It is some of the complexity of executing some of these things. It's going to be tough, and at least for me, to see all of this happen in 6 months. But I do think that, one, and I've had this conversation with the mayor initially about the role of the commission on this process. I think, Margaret, you may have as well. But I think it may make sense if we're going down route to sort of alert the mayor as well as the city council, if you want, and then sort of keep track of the things, maybe do a report right after 6 months or 7 months to see where we are, and then kind of keep pushing. That's what I'm thinking, that we sort of keep staying on it and let it play out in terms of the recommendations, and then say, okay, 6 months has gone by, not 7 months, 8 months has gone by. This is where we are. This is what we think should happen more of. You understand? So
I don't agree.
You don't agree? Okay,
No.
go ahead.
I don't think we should wait 6 months. There are things in here that say they should be done in 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. There are very few things that say they should take 6 months. I think there should at least be an interim report
Okay,
after 3 months or 4 months. And I think we should do what Ben said. We should write to people and say, this is what we understand you're responsible for. Some of these things they say are immediate. It should be done immediately. You know, about it, the police department, that should be being done now. And
well,
I'd like to know, are they being done now? So I think we should do an analysis and make sure we're correct. And one of the things that Reyes and I talked about is using grad students at UMass Boston and to do some of this work. And we may need some lawyers too, as if we don't have enough of them. But but we've had volunteers, people volunteer from BU and other places, BC where I went, even Harvard, where other people went. And but I think using the students from UMass Boston is a great thing to do, to look at some of this. But I don't think we should wait 6 months. I think that's too far away. And I think we should do it 3 months, 4 months, give the public, this was a very big deal.
right, right.
Very big deal. And if they wanted to wait 6 months, they shouldn't have put everything in, said 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. They should have put everything in for 180 days. They didn't do that. They put it in, most of the stuff, within 60 days or 90 days. Very few stuff is 180 days. So I think
Okay.
we should do an analysis of who's responsible for what and in what period of time. And we should get people to do that. And then we should send out letters to the people who are responsible, tell them we're doing it. And here are the things that we assume we see from the report that you're responsible for. And we want to make sure we're correct and have a talk, discuss with them. And we intend to do a report by March 1st or whatever it is. And do people agree with that? Does that make sense?
I think it does.
It does. And certainly under the short term, many of those things the Boston Police Department could just have done immediately.
It should have already been done.
Exactly,
Yeah, under
exactly,
the short
Not
term.
even, not even,
exactly.
they should have had already been doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is perhaps the report can be brief, doesn't have to be an extensive report, but
No.
it can also serve to identify roadblocks and what we can do to help along and
And
help
we're
the
really,
mayor.
we're really talking about accountability. And Margaret, you're absolutely right. I mean,
We're talking about accountability.
yeah, I mean, that's all, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we ask for a report immediately? Ask from them, what have they implemented?
Well, I think we'll have to figure out what it is they're responsible for so we can hold them accountable. At the moment, you know, it says, like for here, it says Boston Police Department should create a list of 0 tolerance offenses for immediate termination and probable officer list that is publicly available within 30 days. They should do that. So they
And we
should have
should ask
already
for it.
done that, right?
We
yeah,
should ask for it.
Yeah. After use of force instances when a civilian is killed, the officer should have a psychological exam and submit a drug alcohol test. All right, so I think we need somebody to look at these and help us. A lot of these are in the
And a
police
lot of those are
departments.
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of them are easy to pick out who's responsible. Most of them are. It's just
Yeah,
like-
so we ought to really do a very thorough and responsible job here in looking at this. And, you know, like the the BPD ones.
Well,
So-
I will certainly, if you allow me to, I will contact a couple of students, advanced graduate students, and I will need some language about exactly what we want and a time frame, and I can work with them.
Okay, so you know, well, okay. you-
Margaret, I don't understand why we can't just ask the commissioner
That's
for a
it.
report on
That's
his implementation,
The commissioner? What commissioner?
police
The
commission,
police commission.
We
as part
can.
of the Boston Human Rights.
I think we can ask the police commissioner, but I think we should have a list that we can ask him.
For the 30-day list.
Yeah.
That's it.
we-
That's
we-
it.
We should have the 30-day list. We should also have the 60-day list, since the
Yes.
60-day list is January 10th.
Yep, and ask him for both of them as of January 10th.
Yeah, and I think we should do this at our January meeting, have that list ready. And be ready to ask the police commissioner to respond.
I see, and my belief is that we should send him a letter now asking him to give us a report on the 30-day and the 60-day promises on January 10th. Because this is not, you're not going to wait till January 10th to do it. They should be in the process of doing those
Now,
30 and 60-day requirements.
right.
So give us a report of where you stand on these.
Well,
Can I-
he'll say
And it
on
gives-
these,
But it gives us time. We clearly understand this is a very sensitive topic with the police department of giving up this type of information. So the sooner we ask for it, the more we can be proactive in terms of counteracting when somebody starts to delay the process of giving us access to this material. I mean, to Judge Harris's point, I think asking for it now versus later, I'm being very optimistic that everything's gonna go smooth and everything, they're gonna give us all this wonderful stuff. That's a crock. I think our leverage is, we are the commission, and we should ask for it like yesterday. And all we're saying is, this is what you said you were gonna do. We just want to see what's happening so we can support you in your efforts and yada, 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 yada. But this is a tough,
I think, sorry, I
ahead.
didn't mean to
go
interrupt.
ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I think that some outreach before a letter
Right.
from a relatively unknown corner of city government to the police commissioner would be appropriate. I think that I agree with Leonard that is our leverage. And they're going to see the writing on the wall, which is that come March, there will be a report. Maybe we'll color code it, green, yellow, and red. And if there are just like a whole bunch of blank squares for the police department because they refuse to provide any information on that, or we just color everything red that they don't give us information on. You know, and nobody wants a bunch of red marks next to their to-dos.
Or we could just ask the mayor for it.
Well,
We're not an unknown commission to him.
That is correct.
that is true.
well, you know what he's gonna do. He's gonna just push it right to Willie and say, you know, make this happen or get back to him. So either way.
So here's my suggestion after all this. We let the police commissioner know we're interested in getting a status report on where they are on the recommendations of the task force. My assumption is we won't hear anything. That's my assumption, but I don't know. I mean, could be optimistic, we could hear everything. I think the next step then is to send him a letter with the list of all the things that he's responsible for and when, and ask him to respond to each of them. And then in that, to tell him that we're doing a report, and we would appreciate his, his support in answering these. Okay?
Like it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all right. Let's move on to what we, I guess, have, as my understanding now, is that we're talking, let's see if I'm right, Leonard, that we're talking, I talked to Evandro a long time to try to see if I could get this down, was, does Boston have resources for Black men who have suffered trauma in their lives? Is there anything or anywhere they can go, any kind of resources that exist here? And should there be, and what should there be? What would
Well-
it look like? And
well,
what
Kurt-
should there be?
I mean, currently, a lot of us was doing a lot of street work and worked with Robert. He was doing post-traumatic stress trauma response teams, building them in the city, which transferred into the trauma team that's over at Boston Public Health Commission now. But that's normally from extreme traumatic things that have happened, i.e. homicides, i.e. fires, i.e. Pretty severe
Right,
instantaneous things. But there hasn't been something that's related just from the trauma of racism, the trauma of microaggressions that happen every day, the trauma of discrimination. There's nothing per se in place for that.
right,
We have substance abuse, we have youth violence prevention programs, but nothing where it's associated with an ill. When I say ill, i.e. substance abuse, i.e. homicide, something, but just living in an environment where, because of the color of your skin and the trauma that's associated with that. Alongside with infant mortality with Black women, why there's infant mortality, and I know you know about this, Margaret, is in terms of constriction of the veins and arteries of the racism that happens. And that's why infant mortality is very, very high. So on that same vein, what do we have for men currently? Other than sports and fellowship and church, there hasn't been something that's really been targeted, that you don't have to be, quote unquote, Narcotics Anonymous, quote unquote, survivor of homicide. You're just a person.
right.
You're Judge Harris, who happens to be a Black man, but deals with the trauma and stress every single day of being a Black man living in this society.
Right.
I would say there's nothing that I know of. Evandro, maybe you might know, Judge Harris, you might know, but I know of, or I've ever funded, that really centered around it.
So here's the question I have. Are we trying to provide something in terms of, an event or two, or are we trying to determine what should exist in Boston as a resource, institutionalized? I mean,
This is big. It's very big, and I would not want to take on that charge. I would take on the charge of putting it up front and personal and letting people know this is something that is real, because a lot of people don't believe it unless you live it. And I think it becomes important that we put it up front, have those conversations, to have that dialogue. And I hope and pray that through this, bringing it up front and talking to the folks who have been up front on the ground over the past 50, 100 years, that people will start to take it much more serious. And it's not an excuse for behavior. It's real. And how do we make it real? Because it's a human rights issue around the trauma and stress that Black men have to deal with. So with the conference and the piece that we want to put together, it's really about acknowledgement. It's really about putting it up front. It's really about teaching, but it's also about healing. Because, you know, part of the healing process to me is just acknowledging that it exists. And a lot of people look at it as an excuse for behavior, and it's so much more
Right.
than.
So you're seeing it as information, education, and maybe an opportunity for Black men to also gather together to and maybe that as well. I mean, but information and education for the general public to recognize this as an issue, and also maybe a session where for Black men to experience together some healing. Does that?
Yes.
One of the things that happened,
And
one
real
of the
quick,
things
Judge,
that
before
happened,
no, I'm sorry, Judge. Real quick, one thing I just want to mention. Let's try to look at it like when we start looking at suicide by cop.
Yeah,
That was just a word at one point. And we dug deeper into it, and we understood clearly, because of lost hope of young Black boys, they were setting themselves up to be killed
yeah,
by police. And so
Yeah.
now suicide by cop is considered a way of suicide.
yeah,
And it's been acknowledged by the National Suicide Association, the Black Suicide Association out of Washington, D.C. So in that same vein, that was a thing of just a conversation, but when people brought it up to the surface, it started to get the value that it was needed. I'm sorry, Judge, you can go down. I'm sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, you know, there are a number of different folks talking about this issue. There's no coordinated discussion. Most of the time when it's done, it's not led by Black men. It's not led by the folks who have suffered
right.
the issue, suffered through the issue. What I want to see happen is that we get a discussion started, that people start saying, we need to study this more, we need to address it in some way, and we need to work out how to address it from the very youngest child so that they don't go through some of the things some of us older men have gone through. When when Skip Gates got arrested in Cambridge, Charles Ogletree asked a number of professional Black men
Right.
to talk about an incident they had. From my discussion with a lot of those men, the hardest thing was choosing which incident
That's right.
Yeah,
to write about.
yeah. Skip Gates lived on the next street to me in Cambridge
Uh-huh.
when I was at Leslie, and his daughter used to ride to school with my son. So I know exactly where he lives. I mean, he lived literally on the next street to me. I mean, when that happened, I was suitably horrified.
But see, some of us, that wouldn't have happened to because we know how to deal with the cops from life experiences.
Right, right.
You know, but the point that I guess I was trying to make is that it's so common
Yeah,
for Black men.
yeah,
We don't even talk about it,
right.
live with it.
Yeah,
And I think about the anger and the rage even that I sometimes felt in my life that was never been addressed. And I often wondered with some of the folks that I had anger issues with, what would have happened if I had come across them. Most of it was from Chicago before I got here as a young man. So I was sort of removed from it.
right.
But you never leave it, you know, and you don't realize how you're reacting sometimes as a result of a prior trauma.
That's right.
Right.
That's
And
right.
I think we need to address that because
Right.
I think it's one of the feeders
Yeah,
into the criminal justice system.
right.
The fact that men walk around angry
Yeah.
and
With
traumatized.
trigger.
You know, it's interesting. My cousin played a dirty joke on me one time. He calls me up. He's a doctor. He calls me up. He said, "Hey, Lynn, how you doing? I said, I just went by your house and there was some white people in front of your house. I started freaking out. I said, what they look like? They had on suits. All I thought about was the cops coming to my house, kicking my door in. I'm a community activist. Everybody knows me. Everybody. And I start to freak out when and then he goes, oh, got you, didn't I? And I was like, I don't think that's funny. But, that's,
Yeah.
but just think of the mindset. I'm a community activist. I know everybody. But yet when you tell me there's some white men in front of my house, I think there's something wrong.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. 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 All right, okay. I was just trying to get the goal, right? Of what we're trying to accomplish here, what you're trying to accomplish here. So, so people can recognize the issue and that particularly for Black men, that it be recognized that it's a real issue and acknowledge it. Okay. All right. And we have a date in January,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Okay.
So let me add a couple things here, if I may. To be honest, this issue is one of the, not issue, I don't know what to call it, this topic, right? It's one of the reasons why I thought perhaps we wouldn't get into the BPD stuff right away. I mean, reality is we have to execute these things, right? And when we just talked about 3 or 4 or 5 big things that we hope to accomplish within the next 6 months. And the reality is that we do have, obviously, hopefully we're going to get the students to help out, but I don't want to, and to some extent, maybe other people putting words in my mouth because I've heard it before, is that if we come out the gate and we're sort of in different spaces, right, trying to execute things with a short staff, we may fall short in things, right? My real concern is that digital divide is a big thing to work through, and marginalization of Black males. Lee and Judge, we've been debating and discussing and moving forward, and we got this event in 30 days to execute, right? And these things are real details to do a good job at. Like we got this immigrant stuff with the Trust Act that we just talked about, right? Police reform task force. These are big bites, right? And I'm not being, obviously my position is to execute what you want, but I'm a little concerned that if we come out the gate with a lot of big stuff, it may kind of all get like this in me and Susan trying to do it and so on, right? And so I want to kind of express some of that because that was part of why I thought maybe we could wait with BPD a little bit and play out some of the things we want to do with Black men. And if we are going to do it, right? If we are going to do this one event in January and then perhaps maybe do a meeting in the spring and so on, and maybe culminate to an event of sorts, that makes sense. But the conversations I've had with you particularly, there's a lot of things we want to do right away, right? So I wanted to kind of just put that out there as we, and I think actually Chief Crockett might have said this to both you and I, Chair Margaret, is that, when we're coming off the gate, we need 1 or 2 things to sort of say, this is what we're here to do, right? But I think if we're doing different things and when we're not coming with a bang, hopefully we're gonna hire an outreach coordinator soon. So we're gonna pick up some of the stuff and work on long-term. But, I am a little concerned about packing too many things coming right in 2021 with the 2 staff that we currently have.
Well,
but I wanted to kind of put that.
Evandro, but one of the things that I agree with you, that I know we're limited staff-wise and all, but that's why I said we should just ask for a report from them. And then we can decide
Yes.
what we need to do as far as the police are concerned. They might be on point. We don't know.
Right.
There might not be anything for us to do. But if we wait, then it'll be a year from now before we get anything done. And so we just get the report from them, find out what they're doing, if they're able to live up to the mayor's promises. And if not, what time schedule are they offering?
And
We don't have to do anything immediately as a response to that, but we need to have the information so that we can plan a response.
Okay.
And at least at minimum, and I agree with you, Evandro, in terms of not wanting to have all these different things, but at least we'll be informed, either they're doing it or they're not doing it, because of the BPT, that's a huge public issue. And that has been on the forefront for many, 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 many years. And now our mayor has made a decision that's going to be real and going to be happening. So therefore, people are going to look at us, at least that we've acknowledged, and try to get information. If we get it, we get it. We don't, we don't. And take it from there. As Judge Harris just said, if it comes back and it says everything is fine and go roly-goly, that's wonderful. I doubt it, but that's wonderful. But if
Right.
it isn't, at least we're informed and we have the information. We can talk very intelligently about it if needed.
Right, no,
Well,
So I
go ahead,
support
go
you.
ahead.
I just want you to know I do support you.
Thank you.
I'd like to also say, Director Carvalho, that I know you only, there are just two of you for all these things, but you should also count on me, and I am sure on the other commissioners. Put us to work. I'll be happy to work with the students, and I'll be happy to. I've been one of the things I miss, and I would really want to have. I want to be reading more about the issues of the city of Boston. I want to have more data in front of me. I want to visualize some of the issues, neighborhood by neighborhood. And I understand that, Susan, you cannot be doing that, but perhaps that's one of the things that we can have our the graduate students doing the research for us, sending it to us, and then it's up to the commissioners to do the homework. But I am going to speak only for myself. I want to be better informed. I want to be, I know, and I know I can, there is a lot of information out there, and I know that the graduate students at the graduate program at UMass on human rights at UMass Boston can gather that information, put it in packages and deliver it to us. And it is up to us then.
Okay.
So what I mean, it's put us to work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other comments? I mean, the thing that has a time frame on it is the police report. I mean, that's the one thing that has a time frame on it.
Mhm.
It says 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. If we're going to be effective, then we got to pay attention to the time frame, and that's what Wayne Budd asked us to do.
Correct.
So it isn't like, okay, well, we can just wait.
No, I guess I wasn't explaining.
Wait a minute.
Go ahead. Go
We
ahead.
can do the thing in January on blackmails, and we can do that and see where we go from there. And I'll talk to Mike Lynch about the digital divide, and we got to find somebody who can do more work than my own son did on the data he collected. And Ben, I know he sent you some extra stuff in the tool he worked on. And maybe he can find someone else who has those same skills to, we got to find somebody who's a data analyst, big data person who can do the kind of things that brings it down to small data to give us better. And maybe there are people raised in your program who can who can manipulate the kind of data that Michael used and get it more defined in terms
There are
of data.
programs that can be applied to that information.
Well, and I'll have Michael send you the data he sent Ben, the tools he used to do it. And that will help define what we could use in terms of the digital divide stuff, because I do think finding out by race, the number of families, if we can get that data more refined, would be
Right.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
as much as we can get.
There's some national and local data that the Pew Research has done Also, there's a couple other resources. I'll find them and shoot them over to you. And they've developed tools that they've been using in Boston, mapping out different areas and stuff like that. I know the Boston Foundation did something too. I'll make a phone call over there. and see if I can-
We went to everybody here.
Really?
And in fact, the map that Michael did, we were told is the best map that they have.
Wow.
That Mike Lynch and the Boston Foundation people and Tech Goes Home said, this is the best data
Wow.
we've seen.
That's excellent.
Well, it's not excellent. It's
No, I'm
actually
just saying,
disappointing in
yeah.
terms of,
So it sounds like we're gonna have to do it ourselves.
well, somebody's going to have to take what he did and then, do a more sophisticated version and tease out more information. So people loved what he did, and we're glad to have it. And so that's why we know there isn't much that exists.
Wow.
'Cause, yeah, I know.
Wow.
Yeah. But if, I don't want to discourage you. If there's anything, I'm not saying that I looked everywhere and I could have missed some, don't get me wrong. So if you think there is something around that we can use, please send it to me or let me know.
Will
For
do.
sure. All right. So we need some help, right? We definitely need some help. And
Yes, we do.
we'll start with your graduate students and one of the things is about the data stuff, and the other thing is about the police stuff. And the police stuff, I think, is just common sense. I don't think we need criminal justice people or police or lawyers, because I think it's just common sense, really. I think the thing that needs sophisticated skills is the digital divide deep dive.
Okay,
Those are sophisticated data analysis skills
okay.
that are not easily findable. Ben, you looked at it. Don't you think that's right? It's sort of harder to.
I didn't get a chance to look at the additional info he sent, but yeah, I mean, there's got to be, I think, there is some more work to be done.
Yeah.
I mean, but also, if we're going to have a hearing, we need a body, a person to come in. I mean, like, there's got to be somebody that explains, I know what went into this chart. This is why it says what it says, and that probably should not be or something.
I totally agree. I totally agree. We have to find someone
Yeah.
besides Michael who can do this work.
But also, like, it literally, because of that fact, it literally cannot be one of us.
I agree, absolutely.
So, I mean,
Right.
it could be a grad student.
Outside expert. Yeah. Outside expert graduate student, it's fine. Somebody who has those skills, absolutely. And maybe what I'll do, Reyes, is have Michael send you the package and talk
Yes.
whatever graduate student you have.
Yes,
So.
yes,
Okay.
that'll be good.
Is there anything else? We did a lot. And what we'll need to do is figure this workload in terms of the ability here to manage it. If we're going to do the police report and the digital divide, and we're going to do blackmails and trauma, everybody will have to understand the balance here in terms of the workload.
Thank
So,
you.
and we've got some help with the blackmails with the guy from wherever he's from.
Minnesota.
Okay,
Minnesota,
Minnesota. I was thinking it was. from
Brandon
somewhere
Jones,
else. Okay,
Minneapolis.
all right, Minneapolis, okay. So we'll hire some temporary, consultants to help us. We got the money, let's do it. Let's find some people to help us.
Great. That's great.
Right? Yeah. All right. So Members of the public will now have an opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment. To do so, raise your hand or type your question in the chat in the application via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press 9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to staff via email at susanhemley@boston.gov. Not. Ooh. I think the judge had to leave, so.
Yes, the judge had to leave.
There was a hand.
Yeah, I just, so it's Alana, she should be on. 1 second. So Alana, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Here you go.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
So Alana, you do have 2 minutes. I will time you, so go.
Oh, I'm not going to be long. I'm just saying that I'm more than willing to help you guys with anything. Okay, I've been trying to volunteer my time and just get involved for the longest time. So any help that you need, I'll be more than happy. So just let me know what I can do.
Great,
Okay?
thank you. So why don't you send your information to Susan, okay? And what your background is, and let's see how we, you could be helpful to us.
We've, Margaret, briefly, we did talk to Elena. We talked to her in the past, and I've actually, Susan and I both met with her, so we'll.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right,
she's
great.
certainly, and I think I think she organized the event over at UMass, which the commission attended and it talked about human rights cities.
Was that the panel that was just?
Yes,
held?
yeah.
Oh,
She was the moderator, if I think.
Oh,
Yeah. So
terrific.
she's very.
Yes.
So we know of her.
We want to do one on immigration here too at some point.
Yeah, and my background, I have a PhD in global inclusion and social development, and my dissertation was specifically on immigrants' rights and specifically their right to work and other human rights. So my specialty and my theoretical frameworks that I'm utilizing in my research are human rights and human capability based. So, and I've been involved with the initiative to sort of resume Boston as a human rights city since 2015. So I've been really, really anxious to get involved in whatever capacity. So I'm open. I'm right here. I even have a sign right there that says, "Welcome to Boston, a human rights city," right there. I'm super passionate, I'm ready to work. So use me.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Reyes, you must know each other?
Yes, well, I met her last week at the panel.
I see. Okay. All right. All
Thank
right.
you, Alana.
Briefly, yeah.
Maybe the two of you would talk.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That would be great. Okay.
Thank you, Alana.
So much.
Is there anybody else, Susan?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. All right. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So happy holidays. I
Thank
think,
you.
what's today, Wednesday? Tomorrow's the last night of Hanukkah, I think, right? And
And today is also International Human Rights Day.
no,
Yeah.
last week
Last week was
Last week.
the
Oh,
10th.
well, it's
was
the 10th.
the
Yes, the
10th.
10th. Yes.
Was, I actually wrote something for it. I'm going to send it to you. See what you think. I actually sat down and tried to write something to celebrate International Human Rights Day, but I got so depressed in terms of trying to think of something to celebrate. But I'm going to send it all to you. I'm going to send you what I wrote. Anyway.
Madam Chairwoman,
What?
may I make a quick announcement?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to make an announcement to everyone. If you know any groups or organization, churches, neighbors who need masks, hand sanitizer, gloves, please give me a call. I'll bring them to you. You can meet me somewhere. It could be from 1 mask to 1,000 masks. I'm in the business of giving it out free. So please, no one should be without a mask.
Yeah.
So if you know of anyone or can think of somebody who would be welcome to get 500, 1,000, 2,000, whatever you need, please reach out to me.
Yeah.
Leonard, I'm gonna pass that information to my neighborhood association in Four
Yes.
Corners, because I think there'll be people who will take you up on that.
That'd be great. That's my own neighborhood.
Good for you. Thank you. All right. Have a good holiday, folks. See you in January.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Bye, everyone.
Hey.
Bye.
Bye.